Nice, man. So why aren't you at work today?
uh, Kind of a funny and stupid story. Just little thing happened at the gym. Actually, not even at the gym, but I assume that it was because I went to the gym yesterday. Yeah, I was just at the gym, and when I was getting home, I have a sensitive neck, so every now and then, I'd say probably every month almost, it seems like I have a pinched nerve in my neck that just completely immobilizes me pretty much. So yeah, me being a landscaper kind of gives me the excuse not to go out in this Vancouver weather, currently 3 degrees here, so you know, that's why.
And you're still getting paid, right? Because you're a union guy.
Uh, I don't want to share too many details, but I don't have too much trouble staying home when I want to.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, right? Because you're a union worker in BC, so you've got it pretty good. But do you think you have it as good as government employees in France?
Um, I honestly, so I never looked at working for the government while I was living in France. But from everything I've heard from my in-laws who are French, from a lot of our French friends that my wife and I share, I actually probably have it better. The government workers in Canada or even in North America, I might say, not that I know too much about the United States system, but I know that we do have it really well compared to France, for government workers.
Are you just talking about the pay or holidays and Social Security as well?
Um, well, definitely the pay. By far, the pay is, you can't even compare the pay. We have it really good compared to them. But also for government workers, holiday, I mean, starting out, yeah, you won't get as many holidays, obviously, as a European worker. But then I guess once you get seniority, it's just it compares directly. Like 5 weeks in Europe, I think maximum here, maximum with seniority time off is 6 weeks paid vacation for my job once you get
Oh,
seniority. So yeah.
I am out of the government employee loop. So I didn't know you can get 6 weeks in
Yeah,
Canada.
that's with seniority. So I mean, you got to serve your time first, but I get the minimum is 3 weeks. The minimum is 3 weeks paid vacation, plus your
Mhm.
sick days, plus your family days, plus all these other loopholes that you can jump through to get um, a variety of ways to get paid days off.
Okay. Well, since you weren't a government employee in France, I think it's a little bit hard to compare the two jobs, but you've worked for private companies in BC, in Vancouver, and you've worked for a private company in Paris. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, the differences and experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I can't go. I don't want to criticize too much the landscaping industry in France, just because I only worked for two companies. One was a decent experience, like company wise, the workers, the employees, the coworkers, everyone was super friendly, and it was a good workspace. It just wasn't right for me in the sense, and really when I say it wasn't right for me, it was just the pay is just, it wasn't good. Like it wasn't good compared to what I was used to earning back home here in Vancouver in BC, Canada. So it was really hard for me to get past the point where I was not getting paid what I was used to. And I felt like, don't get me wrong, I love landscaping. One of the best things about it is that I get to spend my days outside. And in the summertime, I think that like there's honestly, there are better jobs, but for me, it made it. Like that's what made it. I was outside 8 hours a day. I was using my hands, using my brain, being creative. And on top of that, in Vancouver, at least, I was getting paid pretty well. So I was like, well, that's awesome. But
Yeah.
then when I moved to France and when I tried landscaping in France, the work was hard, or the work was the same, and I was enjoying the work. The hours were longer, and then the pay was worse. So to me, I was like, well, I don't enjoy the work enough to be like getting paid not as well. Like at the end of the day, I was felt like I was working essentially for less than minimum wage is what it felt like, even though it was all legal. Because in France, they had this system where you didn't get paid for your travel time. And then, so yeah, in landscaping, obviously, there's a lot of time where you're spent in the truck going from site to site if you're not at a site all day. So it ended up being like I would have to be at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and
Yeah.
then, which is fine, that's normal for landscaping, but I wouldn't get to leave and be in my car on my way home until 5:30 or even 6 o'clock. So
But is
that's
that
like,
also because you get the, what is it, a 2 hour lunch break or something?
no, not where I was working.
Oh,
So
shit.
so yeah, we'd get an hour lunch break, but still, say I have to be at work at 7, I have to be at my job place at 7 o'clock, and I don't get in my car until, we'll say, 5:30 to 6 o'clock. That's 10 and a half, 11 hours, minus 1 hour for lunch, because that's normal. That's still 9.5 hours or 10 hours, right? That's a long day. And then your pay is only getting paid, and I don't know the exactly how it worked, but at the end of the day, I was only getting paid for an 8 hour day, but I was still there for 10 and a half, 11 hours. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the pay wasn't that great to begin with, even based on an 8 hour day. So, anyways, that was a bit of a rant.
No,
But
all good, because I feel like so many people have this idea that in a lot of European countries, especially a country like France, that they have certain like socialist type safety nets, right? And that if you're working a minimum wage job, you can still have a pretty good life. But it seems from your experience that with a job like landscaping, which is usually a little bit lower paid than some, right? You had a much better life in Vancouver, which is an incredibly
well,
expensive city.
here's the thing, though, is that if I actually tell you my salary, I actually, what in France's perspective, I actually was making okay money. Like I wasn't making like shit money in terms of France. It's just that in Vancouver and in North America, we value trade jobs at a much higher rate than I think. I don't want to say Europe, but I think it is, I think I can generalize and say Europe, or at least
Oh,
for sure in France,
yeah.
because in and I'll just say, like, if you're in Canada, if you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, if you're a landscaper, anything that is a Red Seal certified trade, uh, you're not going to be raking in the money, but you can actually live a pretty comfortable lifestyle in North America by having a trade.
Yeah.
Um, but from a North American perspective, we always kind of mock them, and we say, well, why are the French always on strike? Like they have it so good over there. But do they? You know, like,
Well, then that's another question. Do you have any insight into the healthcare and the universities? Because we always have this idea like, oh, university's almost free in Europe. But once you're here, you realize that that's
so
not really the case, right?
exactly. University is not free in France. If you want a good university that can get you a good job.
Hmm.
Yes, you can get a bachelor's degree in France without paying money, but I definitely know a lot of people that have paid more than a Canadian education for university in France to have a good school that's recognized as like a, I guess,
When we're
for,
comparing like the top 150 universities, right? Like when we're comparing UBC to one of the top universities in France, right? In that case,
yeah,
it might be
like,
more expensive.
yeah, exactly. And I don't want to say too much because again, I don't know all the facts, but I do know it's not 100% free. I think there are
Yeah.
more opportunities for students to get aid and not have to take out loans.
Yeah.
But I also know that, like, my wife paid for university. She didn't,
Oh, that's another
yeah.
thing I want to get into is the culture of loans, right? Like in North America, it's normal to get a loan for almost anything, for your car, obviously for a house. Um, but they also have this credit system, right? You need a certain credit score to be able to get a house. It's not just about your salary. In Europe, it's not like that. Why do you think people are more reluctant to get loans here? Because I just don't hear about it as often. Also, when it comes to starting a business, right? Not just personal purchases, but I find that in North America, people are more likely to get a loan to start a business, whereas in Europe, people are kind of reluctant to do that and kind of, more likely to look for a government job or to just kind of work their way up the ladder.
Well, that's kind of, you mentioned there about two different things, like two different topics. So the first topic is, why are Europeans more reluctant to take out credit? And then the second topic that you mentioned there is the entrepreneurial spirit of Europeans versus North Americans. So I'll get into, first off, I'll kind of just talk on the subject of like my experience with my wife, obviously French, born and raised in Paris, lived in Paris essentially her whole life, but now we reside in Canada. And they are so disciplined when it comes to spending only what you can afford and not wanting to take out a loan, not borrow any money from the bank if you don't have to, even if that's for your house. Like when I had a conversation one time with my in-laws, and we were talking about real estate, and they mentioned, oh, well, if we have this much, like, why don't we just find something that's like that in that price range and just take out no loan, no mortgage, or like a very minimal mortgage. And I was like, well, you can do that, of course, but if you have X amount of money already, why don't you take out maybe like another loan, like another mortgage to get even better, even bigger, even better. But that, and I know that's just so North American, like get bigger, better, more expensive. That's just North American perspective, you know.